Hello, my name is Ken Machande, and today we are going to be talking about budgeting. This is the second installment on money matters, and the coronavirus is going around, and so instead of having a face-to-face in the classroom meeting, we're going to do it just by a YouTube video. I hope you get something out of this. So, I don't know why they gave me the worst topic to talk about, budgeting. I mean, talk about boring. How bad is this going to be? Who likes to budget? Well, frankly, I don't know anyone who does. Except for this. Everyone budgets. You budget, I budget, students budget, everyone who has a job budgets. Now, you might not think of it as a budget, but just consider this. If you went to work this morning, you started a budget yesterday. You started a budget when you started to figure out what time you had to get up this morning in order to get ready for work, in order to travel to work, and punch the time clock. You had to figure out when you were going to go to bed, how much sleep you needed. You had to plan, in essence, your entire evening to get ready for your 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock start time. That's a budget. Budgets are not necessarily just numbers. We're going to talk about some numbers today, kind of in an abstract way, but please understand that a budget is nothing more than a plan to do something. And I think for financial purposes, for us personally, what we have to understand is that plan has to have some sort of a goal. So what's your goal? Is it to save up for a vacation? Is it a plan to have money set aside for your children to go to college? Maybe it's a plan for you to have some money set aside so you could retire at some age. Worse yet, it could be all three, or even more. But if you don't have that goal that you're trying to work for, how do you figure out how to get to that goal? The problem is that some of these numbers become very, very big. I mean, if you think about it, if I have some data that I looked up, and in Virginia, as an example, in Virginia, the amount that you need to retire is somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.06 million. That returns you about $63,000 a year at a draw rate of about 5%. Well, if you're like me, you're not making $1 million a year. So how do you get to that $1 million? $1 million seems like a long ways off. Well, here's the thing. What you have to do is establish a plan and work to over time, taking specific steps along the way. That's a budget. And you can get to that number if you start a budget early and follow along with that plan. Similarly, if you're talking about a vacation every year, you can figure out how to do it with smaller bites. And the smaller bites is what makes budgets work. So here's the thing. The most important thing about a budget is identifying what your goal is. Once you have your goal, you can start to figure out a plan. The result is that if you're following the plan, you can get to your goal, but most folks don't establish a plan. Instead, they think, well, I'll just move from paycheck to paycheck and things will sort themselves out. Rarely does that ever work. So, what do you do? Well, there's a couple different options that you can have. Most folks, if they don't have a plan, they're living paycheck to paycheck, trying to figure out how much my paycheck goes to cover my groceries for the month and maybe some entertainment for the month, make sure I have rent paid or a mortgage paid, and then I'll get another paycheck and things will work out for themselves. And oftentimes, we expand our consumption up to the point of where our paycheck is. If we do that, saving for any plan that you've established becomes very, very difficult. So, what do you do? That's a great question. Well, I read books and I've got a couple options right here. Here we are. Two very popular books from authors. These are probably 8 or 10 years old now. And they're about budgeting and what you should do. One of them says that what you should do is write down all of your expenses. Get a spreadsheet, write down all of your expenses. Have your income, take your expenses away, see what you have left over, and then work from there. It's a very, very good book. It's a very, very good strategy. The other book says that doesn't work. This one says what you need to do is merely pay yourself first. So what's right? Write everything down or pay yourself first? Here's my answer. both work or neither works. We're all different people. We all do things differently. We think differently. We don't all think like we're a CPA, and we don't all think like we have to worry about retirement off in the future. We don't worry about every nickel and dime. Now there's people who do. 40 years ago, I was 20 years old and I had a friend. In his breast pocket, he kept a notebook. And every time he spent any money at all, he would write down what he spent that for. Whether it was a soda, whether it was a cassette tape at the time, CDs weren't out yet, but whatever it was, he wrote it down in the book and kept track of everything that he spent. And that way, at the end of the pay period, he could see how much he spent against his income and figure out what was going on. I've lost contact with that friend. My bet is he's a millionaire several times over right now, because he's very conscious about how much he spends. On the other hand, there's folks who said, I'm going to pay myself first, and took out $50 or $100, and over the ensuing 35 years, paid themselves first and saw that money grow. Many of those people have become financially independent as well. So there's a couple different options that you have there. But the people who haven't been successful are the people who did neither. And so my best instruction to you is to figure out the plan and find the thing that works best for you. So, what works best? Well, here's a piece of advice from me that probably has very little to do with budgeting. And this is what it is. Banks issue credit cards, and credit cards are deadly. The reason that banks issue credit cards is to make the ability to have transactions easier. And I'm going to expand credit cards just a bit. I'm going to talk about credit. If you go to Best Buy, you'll see that if you sign up for a card, you can save 10% off the purchases today. Or if you go to some other stores, you can get credit immediately to buy things that you might think you need immediately. The problem with a credit card is that it lacks the substance and the psychological understanding of what it is. It's a piece of plastic. If you take a credit card and you want to buy a soft drink, it's $2. There's no problem. You put this piece of plastic in, pull it out, $2 is charged. If you wanted to buy something more expensive, let's say a 70-inch flat screen TV that might cost $1,700, you pull out this flat piece of plastic, you put it in, and you pull it out, and you've got the $1,700 flat screen TV. What's the difference in the transactions? For you, there's no difference unless you look at your bank account. So we don't really identify when we're using credit cards what amount of money that we're actually spending. And as a matter of fact, that's psychologically why banks want to give you credit cards and why companies like Best Buy want to give you credit cards. Because what you'll see is, well, it only costs an extra $100 or $250 or maybe $300, and I can handle that. The problem is that credit is not free. Credit causes you to incur interest. And interest is the thing that causes the price of whatever you're buying, that 10% discount they're giving you at Best Buy to enroll in their credit program. They're going to recoup that with interest. So here's an example. At a standard rate of somewhere in the neighborhood of 13 or 14%, if you took out a loan for $2,000 to buy something, whatever it is, let's just call it the flat screen TV, because you need that right now because, well, there's no football or baseball or anything else on today. But maybe Netflix. You need it to watch Netflix to help us get through this coronavirus because we can't go out and see anything else. So you buy this thing for $2,000. 14%. If you're making the minimum payments, it's going to take you years and years and years to pay it off. 8, maybe 10 years. And if you're making the minimum payment, the amount that you're going to pay for that $2,000 investment over doubles. It's about $4,300. So the great 10% deal that you got for buying the bigger TV, you're ended up paying over double for it. Now here's the problem with that. First of all, the obvious. You're paying way more than what you should have. But the second thing is that you're committing future income. You're committing your wages in the future to pay off for something right now. Does that make sense? Is that what you want to do? To commit yourself to the future to get something immediately right now that in most cases is a consumer item, so it becomes almost worthless after you started using it. That doesn't make a lot of sense. But what it does, it traps you. Interest traps you. When you sign long-term obligations like a loan, like a rent agreement, like a mortgage, like credit cards, what you're doing is obligating your future for things that you get right now. And when you do that, that gives you less flexibility in your life. You have to stick with the job. You've got bills that are coming due. That can cause a lot of stress. Further, the interest payments that you're making are limiting your ability to do other things that you might want to do with that future money. And so it becomes a lose-lose situation for you. And yet, what's happening is that companies are doing that because they understand the psychology of the plastic cards, that if we give you the plastic cards, you're more apt to upbuy. So, what do? As 1970 as this may sound, my recommendation is that you pay cash. If you pay cash for everything, there is a psychological element that when you're laying out $20 bill after $20 bill after $20 bill, you know how much is going out. And you're not as quick to buy the more prestigious package, if you will. You'll buy the thing that you need because you recognize that this is cash going out of your hand. Further, if you have cash, it means you have cash. You're not promising something in the future. If you're not promising something in the future, that means that you've taken care of that obligation now, and you don't have a future obligation. Now, of course, there's going to be some situations where you have to enter into contracts. If you need an apartment, you need to sign a 6-month or a 12-month contract. I get that. But make sure that you're entering into something that's smart. A 30-year mortgage, perhaps, you need to enter into. If you need transportation, not many of us have $20,000 around to just throw out to get a car. So a place to live and a car, I get it. Beyond that, I don't get it quite as much. And here's the other thing with the mortgage, the rent, and the car. Do we need to live like millionaires? That's a fantastic question. And the answer is we all want to have a better lifestyle than what we have. Even the people who have a great lifestyle want to have a better lifestyle. But the point of the matter is that sometimes we're encouraged to live beyond our means. Your biggest costs are going to be places to live. Your rent, your mortgage. And who doesn't want to have a wonderful place to live? I mean, you spend well over half your life in your house or your apartment. So I'm not saying that you don't want to have a place that's nice. But what I am saying is you got to think very carefully about the consequences of up-buying again. So if you're a younger person, maybe coming out of college in the next year or two, what would be my advice? Well, my best advice would be this, is that you would find a 2 or a 3 bedroom apartment or house and find a roommate. You're going to slash your cost by at least 40%. That 40% can go to different things, maybe like a 401k, a retirement plan. It could go into some other things that you need to take care of, because most of us coming straight out of college didn't have the money to buy couches, to buy pots and pans, or maybe a flat screen TV. But when you're saving the money on other expenses, you have that flexibility. What about a car? Cars are great. Brand new cars are even best. You can go out and you can look at it and you can get sucked in by all the cool features that cars have, the backup camera, the sensors in the front, the great radios. You got everything in there. And you get to pay the full price. $25,000 or $30,000, and you can get a loan right now for every car that's on the lot. You go to the Chevy dealer, you got the Ford dealership, you go to the Volkswagen dealership. They have banks lined up to give you loans. What do? You need a car to get back and forth to work. Here's my best advice. Don't buy new. Buy a car that's 3 years old, maybe 4, with low miles on it. Maybe 20, 25, 30,000 miles, you can find them. They're there. They're all over the place. And what you're going to end up doing is saving probably close to half, maybe even a little bit more, of the original sticker price. Is it the new car? Does it have the new car smell? It's new to you. It might not have the new smell, but here's what it's going to do. It's going to get you back and forth to work just like the newer car, except you're going to owe half as much. And it will last virtually as long as the new car. This also gives you flexibility to do some other things. And if you haven't noticed the theme of the day, flexibility is important. Well, why is flexibility important? Well, let's talk about what's going on today. Looking at the stock market, looking at what's going on around us. DC, Maryland, New York, New Jersey have all shut down restaurants. They've shut down movie theaters. They've shut down public transportation. They've shut down many other things because of the spread of the coronavirus. Well, what's this mean to us? Well, it means that if you're a wage worker working for $1 per hour, maybe 15 bucks an hour or $7 or however much it is, if you're in one of these industries, the likelihood that you're going to have a paycheck over the next coming weeks is, just to say it, it's probably going to start to fall off. If you've taken out loans, what are your debtors going to want? They're going to want to be paid. That's the flexibility I'm talking about. That's the flexibility. Or let's imagine that in 3 or 6 weeks that we're back to where we want to be in the economy, and you decide you don't like your job and you want to move somewhere else. Well, if you have loans, you lose the flexibility of saying, I'm done with this job, I'm moving on to something else, until you get something lined up somewhere else. And that lining up is a difficult thing to do unless you're in the new place. So flexibility is really, really important. But the other thing that is really important is that when you don't have debt, when you're not paying interest, when you're not obligating your future wages to enjoy current things, what you have is more disposable income. More income to use for things that you need immediately. And that kind of flexibility is really, really important. And it's also the flip side of the same coin. When we have debt, that's when lives become much more difficult to live, because we have the obligation and our disposable income shrinks tremendously. So here's my point. If you want to have financial freedom, if you want to attain the goals you want to set for yourself, whatever those goals are, the best advice I can give you is to establish a plan. There's different ways to establish a plan. Pay yourself first, watch what you spend. Or pay yourself first and watch what you spend. That's probably the best advice. But establish a plan, limit the amount of credit that you choose to use, pay with cash, understand that you don't have to look like a millionaire to be a millionaire. I hope this has helped you. And if you have questions, please come see me in Woodard Hall once we're out of the coronavirus season. Thank you very much.